And we are live. Hopefully everybody can hear us well. If anybody's connected, if you don't mind just putting a comment saying, yes, we sound okay. First and foremost, thank you very much, Mariano, for joining me during this conversation. I want to keep it as open and free form as possible. We can take the topic wherever we want to go here.
Okay, thank you to you, Peter, for inviting me.
First and foremost, I think that I share the audience probably shares this sentiment that both of these books are very well done. I don't say that lightly. I think both, especially combined, are some of the best nonfiction writing that I've read in the past decade or more. And I don't say that lightly, and I'm not a member of your publishing group, so
we can
arrange something later. But no, seriously though, I feel like, and I just wanted to kind of get that out in the front, is that these are brilliantly done, and I don't. So maybe let's start just a little bit with your background. Let's start maybe with what was your education background? What got you into this topic in general, and where and when has that changed possibly within your life? Like, has your attention to this topic changed over time for various reasons? I know I asked a lot of questions there, so that you can pick which one you want.
No, it's okay. Well, my background. First of all, my daytime job. I am a lawyer in my daytime job, but I have a master's degree in strategy and geopolitics from the Argentine Army. I have a specialization in contemporary military history, also for the Army. I'm a second lieutenant in the Argentine Army Reserve, and I'm currently serving. So I am active in the reserves. And why I'm here? I don't know. I really like story. I really like the investigation. As a lawyer, I like to research my cases. And well, one day I read a lot of books, but I want to read a book that no one has written yet. So I say, well, this is a history I want to read it, but the book was not there. So I started writing about things I want to read it. So I'm mostly a reader, not an author. So I'm the opposite of an author. I am a guy who really like to read books, but because the books are not there, someone has to write the books. So well, I started there. But
did you start off thinking that you were going to write a book about it, or that you were very interested in the topic and wanted to teach yourself more? Did you go into the topic thinking or even knowing that, hey, this is important, this should be a book of some? Did it morph? Did it change into becoming a book, or was it a passion?
In fact, the books start as an article. I write a short article. A naval officer who was there contact me and say, yes, your article is good, but I have another opinion. Well, we start chatting with that's opinions, and we start to talk like every couple of days about the article, and the article get bigger and bigger and bigger. And one day was a small book, and another day was a big book. So it started like a hobby,
right?
A short article, like a hobby, and then enlarge. And a lot of people contact me and say, "Well, I could add another thing, another one." And have in mind that a lot of people in the Argentinian Navy, especially in the aeronaval command, so the people in the carrier have a good publicity. So the people who has the superintendent people, the skyhawk people, well, they have their books, but the people, the helicopter people, the recon people, well, they have nothing. So they want their history in a book. So well, maybe is maybe it's a natural consequence
So
to write it.
was the original article publicly available, or was it primarily within naval
No,
contacts?
no, no. It was published in a website here in Argentina, but the article has the wrong conclusion. The conclusion is the in 5 May 1982, the trackers attacked submarine Splendid, but that was not the case really. Splendid was like 100 miles away from that position, but at the time with the data available, well, it was maybe it was a good idea to point to Splendid as the target of that two torpedoes dropped that day. But well, I don't know, still we are looking about the targets. I
Hmm.
don't know what the tracker aircraft attacked that day. It's still very interesting because was the target was not a whale, was not a failed phase one. People there was really convinced that was a sub, and well, I don't know. Maybe never we are going to know about the identity.
You mentioned this before, but I particularly appreciated in both books the investigative report, or the investigative reportive nature of it. Right, I felt like you, and it didn't come across as too lawyery, I guess would be the way to put it. It just came across as just well executed and well researched. And so one of my first questions would be, there's a lot of information here, and you did a lot of um, investigation of the dates and the reports from each side. Did you find yourself with a big whiteboard of how did you maybe explain a little bit, how did you go about piecing together all this different information? Did you start off with a small topic within the topic, investigate it, and then look for both sides? It sounded like through reading it that you had you looked for evidence from one side, and then you looked for the proceedings, or log evidence from the other side. And I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was really well done as far as lining it up. But just generally, how did you keep track of all this information, and how did you compare it? I'm just very impressed with that.
Well, I have the some charts and data maps in my computer's drafts to have an idea what is going to happen, because sometimes it's very hard to have all the information in your mind. So I really use Google Earth and other programs to have an idea about the development. But before that, first of all, it was really hard to get to access the information here and abroad, because a lot of the information was still not uh, ready to the public. So, well, because I'm a lawyer, I submit a lot of Freedom of Information Acts. So in certain cases, I have an instant okay. In other cases, the first answer was no. I'm appeal and win the case. And this is in the UK side. Here in Argentina, we don't have a proper system about the classification. So it was more than knocking doors and having a case and pick up the telephone to call to some people. And finally, after a lot of time and effort, I have the logs report of proceeding of war diaries of the major units involved, and one's top secret reports of the time. I think the reports of the submarines, the report of proceedings, I think I am just a handful of people have their reports in over the world. Well, of course, it was not a Sunday reading, but it's very interesting, and I have that because, well, freedom of information act is not publicly available. It's not in the archives. So after having all that information, I have I make the charts, the maps. I use Google Earth, and I have an idea. And of course, I have a mostly an army background. Uh, I have a lot of naval people involved in the project, helping me and say, no, we can do that. We didn't do that at the time. But the submarines, we can do that, and something like that. I have a lot of input and help of people in my projects. So yes, that was really a lot of effort, but I was really happy to make that effort. My wife, no, my wife is not happy with the effort, but
I was going to ask what what the cost may have even been, right? So it sounds like the cost was in lost time. Really, it sounds like a lot of personal effort. Did at the time you were going through this level of investigative work, did you already have a publisher in mind? Did you have any resources to help you in seeking?
no,
Okay.
no. First of all, this is a more than it's like a hobby. So you invest in a hobby. So yes,
Yeah.
if I need to pay a researcher, if I need to pay a colleague to submit a freedom of information proceeding, well, it's
Right.
okay.
Right.
I'm not changing my car. I'm not moving to a country clubhouse.
Right.
I'm here.
You're not
I invest in
golfing every week. You're not golfing every week.
exactly.
You're
So
doing your reserve duty and researching. Right.
exactly. So well, that's because my wife is not happy, but well, it's okay.
Such is life.
That's
So I wanted to keep this first part as general as I can. Just starting with A Carrier at Risk, the first book. Hopefully everybody has bought it already. If you haven't, go buy it now. It obviously it concentrates, and I think it does it very well as to what was on hand for the ASW crews. As far as the weaponry and as far as the sensors and so forth. One thing I was very impressed with and didn't really know a lot about was how well their tracker was equipped. Right, I think you went into very good detail about the Jezebel sonar and etc. So from your vantage point, and hopefully this is not too much of a weighted question. From your vantage point, what was the most successful piece of equipment used by the ASW forces of Argentina?
well, the trackers start in all Latin America. A new dimension of anti-submarine warfare, that the AQA4 processor was a milestone here, because before that, all the detection of a submarine is just trying by an aircraft, no, is just trying to detect a periscope. Of course, the helicopter has a diving sonar, but the trackers in all Latin America, the Uruguayan trackers, the Venezuelan trackers, and the Brazilian ones didn't have that kits, or that equipment, or are not really used to use it. In 1982, of course, the AQA-4 was dated, was not state-of-art equipment for the U.S. Navy, for example, but for local standards, South American standards, was really a breakthrough. So this is a new capacity for the all Argentinian Navy, because, well, this is the most interesting part of it. Argentina was using trackers since the 70s, the 60s, sorry, but the A model tracker has not that kind of anti-submarine capacity or capability. So I think the AQA-4 was the most important piece of equipment in the tracker aircraft.
What would you say was the equivalent in the Sea Kings and etc.? What would you say was the most effective detection element or platform for the helicopters in particular?
No, the Argentinians Sea Kings has the standard sonar of the time, the AQS 13. So is an older model than the U.S. Navy has at the time, but it's a fairly modern piece of equipment, but was mostly designed for the active mode. So in a sea like the shallow waters of the Argentinian continental platform, with a lot of noise, a lot of rivers there, in the mainland, etc., was not very useful to detect a submarine. The range was, because of that, very low. So was not very useful for shallow water use. So the sonar voice of the tracker is a more interesting piece of kit for that kind of war, for shallow waters anti-submarine.
So in general, the first detections throughout the conflict were primarily the tracker and or other air assets were for visualization, right? So it exactly. Seemed like, yeah. So I mean, of course, similar to other conflicts, but I think that for me, just as a kind of like a more recent modern naval wargamer, I still sometimes I lose the importance of visual tracking as well. One question I had was, in reading both books, there's the different classifications of the contacts, right? Like probable sub,
yes.
etc. And I didn't really do a good stare and compare, but was there a difference in how the Argentine Navy interpreted that versus the British forces, or was it very identical in how, like, did that ever come into play? Like, were there significant differences in how did those contact levels potentially come into play?
No, well, I understood your question. Have in mind that the Argentinian Navy is modeled after first in the late century, in early late century, after the Royal Navy, and after the Second World War, after the U.S. Navy. So the manuals, the doctrine, the etc. is the same. For example, if you have a photo of Argentinian carrier and you have the shirts of the people on board, the red ones are exactly for weapons, as in the U.S. Navy. The directors or the catapult people have exactly the same shirt, the same procedures, the same all. So classification is mostly the same. Argentinian is still following NATO manuals, NATO doctrine, and remember that Argentina is still training in the UNITAS. with the U.S. Navy or other local navies. So the standardization, the UNITAS exercise means that all people are talking the same language. So if the Argentinian Navy says "search up," is the same search up for the UK Navy or the US Navy. So it's a little detail, but it's not relevant that detail.
Um, so I think so the book kind of emphasizes the fact that only certain individuals of a certain background could make that classification. I found that to be very interesting. Is that so? In other words, an Air Force aircraft spotting a probable sub is taken at a different level as to an ASW operator seeing the same thing. I thought that was very interesting, and I'm assuming that was similar for both sides throughout the conflict as well.
Yes, okay. Just people with certain qualifications could classify a submarine, and have in mind also that the people in the Navy has no faith in the Air Force people or the Army people regarding the submarines, and that happened, of course, in the Royal Navy when people in the Army or says, well, about a submarine, people are skeptic because, well, of course, it's very common to a whale being considered a submarine or a flock of seagulls or something like that. It's very easy to confuse that, especially in the height of battle.
So one thing we kind of spoke about on the side was the level of intelligence on both sides and how it played into the decisions, especially during that first week of May in 1982. And I personally really enjoyed the section on the hexagon system and the satellites and the KH-11 and all that. Are you still there?
Yes. Sorry.
I just blanked that for a second. We spoke about this a little bit privately, but how much did the Argentinian commanders, how much did they know about their system being unencrypted like that? So at any one time during the conflict that you're aware of, did Argentina know that their messaging had been intercepted? And did they ever I thought about this question earlier. It's like, did they ever potentially use the knowledge of the British knowledge of their whereabouts in any way to deceive, right? Did they ever do was there any counterintelligence involved that you ever ran across any documentation of, etc.?
No, yes. Well, the Argentinian coast were compromised because the owner, well, the owner, no, the people who made the crypto AG crypto machines were in fact in collusion with the Western intelligence agencies. Argentina was aware that the crypto machines are not secure at all after the 7 April speak by Ted Rowlands in the UK Parliament, that they informed to the world that the diplomatic cables of Argentina are being read for a lot of time. Argentina, the crypto equipment was the same in diplomatic level than the naval level. So 1 + 1 is 2. So Argentina say, well, my codes are compromised. Argentina changed the codes and for a brief time say that thinks that the codes are secure, but well, of course not. But after that, Argentina tried to keep the traffic to a minimum, the radio traffic to a minimum, and also change the keys a lot of times, much more than in peacetime. But after all, that's never worked at all. So the Argentinian cause was read all over the war. But Argentina sent message to the others. So, for example, submarine Santiago del Estero was not ready to go to the sea. Was in fact going to the scrap yard shortly after the war. But Argentinian keep radio messages to the Santiago del Estero, who was at sea, saying that Santiago del Estero, go to that place, Santiago del Estero, go to that other, Santiago del Estero, report your position. Santiago del Estero was, in fact, in port, never lived. But kind of counterintelligence was made. Was effective? Yes or no? In the case of Santiago del Estero, yes, because the submariners captured at South Georgia were interrogated about the whereabouts of the Santiago del Estero. Where is that submarine? Where is that submarine? We know that the submarine is at sea, but a couple of weeks later, the Santiago del Estero was detected by an American satellite in Puerto Belgrano, so the Ross ended there.
Similar to that, I found it interesting from an intelligence perspective in Go Find Him and Bring His Hat Back. You very clearly depicted some of the commanders' reactions, and it was interesting to talk about the other additional submarines as potentially in the area. So it sounded like, at least from some of those preceding reports, that the intelligence was there, of course, that there were Type 209s in the area or approaching as the task force was coming in. But you kind of mentioned it as a submarine paranoia that grew early on. And I thought it was very interesting how you showed evidence of that. So while there was intelligence available, it seemed like, in reading both of the books, that it became more available over time, right? Like that initial May 1st and May 2nd, the information was maybe not entirely accurate. So it was just very, very enlightening. And in particular, I called out when I was rereading it, pages 38 through 40. I mentioned to myself that I would buy the book, Go Find Him, for just pages 38 through 40, and you need to go buy it to find out what's on those. But so you go ahead and yes, okay. I love your tables. I love your tables. Your tables alone, I would buy. It's just it's simple. It's not overly colored or colorified or anything like that, and it's just really, really nice raw data. And there was one, oh, darn it, I should have had this ready, but there was one mention on there that I thought was interesting. Was the attacking unit Brilliant? This is on page 38 on May 1st at 10:03 Zulu. They mentioned torpedoes exploded when entering the sea surface. I thought that was quite interesting.
Well, so that's because the torpedo fuses are incorrectly in the torpedo, or the other, it could be entering the surface of the sea was a whale, but I don't know. Some people there at Brilliant say that the torpedoes impact a whale just after entering water. So maybe, well, is whales zero, bleaching too.
But it's this level of detail that's just, you can read between. It's very, very interesting information, and you laid it out perfectly in order of time. It's very well done. And then I think page 40, for some reason, I don't know why, I just love this page. I don't think we realize in many other books or in many historical articles that how much ordnance was spent by both sides. Honestly, right? I was flabbergasted as to how many torpedoes were fired or dropped. But in particular, how close San Luis got to the unfortunate wreckage of Sheffield. But what was very interesting about that, because is that I had just previously read Woodward's memoir about the same situation, and I don't know if he was maybe held back from mention. It's very interesting to look at older documentation now that these books are out, right? It's very interesting to see how people talk about the same situations 30 to 40 years ago than is presented in here in a very line specific format. So I was totally unaware that how close they were to the task group. I think at one point it's mentioned here that one spotter thought that the San Luis was within 2,000 yards of the task group. I hope I read that correct.
No, San Luis was never so close. So
right,
but was far away. But in fact, after the war, the press published that the San Luis was very near the invincible aircraft carrier and launched two torpedoes that failed to hit. But San Luis was not there. San Luis was in Area Maria, north of the islands, and then briefly went to Area Isabel, who was also very near the areas. Have in mind that San Luis was not able to enter deep waters because the Argentine Navy has no training or never look after never is not able to combat a nuclear submarine. So being in shallow waters, the Argentinian submarine command has thought that the San Luis has certain margin of security. And in deep waters, no, he's not going to have that edge against a nuclear submarine.
I'm glad you mentioned depths, because I was going to just show the audience something. This is the NOAA. I don't know if you've ever used this, but this is incredible bathymetric information of the area. Now, what we're kind of, maybe we can kind of focus on where Area Maria was in this quadrant, was it not? Can you see what I'm doing?
Yes.
All right. Yes. So what's very interesting, I'm assuming that San Luis would try to drive the nuclear subs into this area of roughly, this is about 100 meters here. That's very low. So just for audience sake, I mean, what makes the nuclear submarine so vulnerable to that depth? Sorry, hold on a second. Let me go back here. Why does a nuclear submarine not operate very well in that environment in particular?
Well, a nuclear boat is a large boat, so operating so close to the bottom is unsafe, first of all. And have in mind that the Argentinian Navy have the information that the nuclear submarines are unable to enter shallow waters, and nuclear boats were not tasked in waters with 100 meters of depth or less. So submarine is not going to operate in a secure way in shallow waters, and the Argentine Navy say, well, they are not going to be there because the doctrine says that.
Right. Was there anything about the torpedoes that were available to the San Luis, or its sensors, or its, I think at the time of May 1st, May 2nd, May 3rd, the fire control system was not operational. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, in most of the time, the computer, the fire control system was inoperative. So the submarine just launched one torpedo, guided manually, and the calculus of the fire control solution is going to made in the manual form. I mean, when in the same way in the Second World War.
So one of the other considerations about driving the British submarines into lower or smaller depths, shorter depths, was so that they cannot get away, right? Because one of the benefits of a SSN is to be able to dive deep and go very fast, right? That was one of the things that throughout the book, a very good points you made about the speed capability at depth of these particular Swiftsure class and Churchill class submarines. So that combined with the experiences, it makes sense why Area Maria was attractive as a spot to prey, if you will. What was I going to get into here? Sorry. At one point or another, we had even on the side talked about the differences between the Tigerfish Mod 0, Mod 1, and the Mark 8, which was eventually preferred over time. I thought it was very interesting to see that it was a quite a balancing factor that both sides had very, very good equipment, right? But untested, right? It just untested. Either you just physically in a combat situation, but from the British perspective, in that environmental situation, right? So you read in these books as well as others that some of the newer missile systems and so forth had issues with just the amount of seawater that was getting in, or that the computer software for them was so new that it hadn't seen any combat. So, but that seemed to be an issue for both sides, which I found very interesting, right? What were some of the not limitations, but what were some of the growing pains of using some of these, like the SST-4? I mean, it sounded like the Argentines had similar issues technologically, right? That where things would misfire or not fire or not leave the tubes, etc. Is there any one thing that comes to mind as far as that limitation from either side?
Well, this is a very interesting thing or topic. That is, Argentina and the Royal Navy has very similar problems with the new torpedoes, the new dead rays of the submarines. You have a new and unproven technology and an old and reliable technology. You have a straight running torpedoes dating from World War II that are very, very easy to use and very reliably. And you have the new torpedoes, the new technology. That's of course is marvelous. You can send a torpedo like 20 kilometers away, while give the torpedo to the target. But in fact, in war conditions, that was not the case. That's why the commander of submarine Conqueror attacked Belgrano with an old torpedo. And that's the failure of the Tigerfish. You know that failure when the commander of submarine Onyx tried to launch two Tigerfish at targets and failed to engage, and finally dispatched the target. The Sir Galahad, the whole of the burned out Sir Galahad with an old Mark 8 torpedo. Argentina has the same problems. Have the very new and untested SS T4 German-made torpedoes. That was probably one of the best torpedoes available of the time, but was really a new technology, an unproven technology, and in combat conditions, well, it didn't work at all. Fault of Argentina? Yes. Fault of Argentina Navy? Yes. Fault of the design of the torpedo? Yes. Argentina never fired a warhead torpedo before the war. and after the war, just 3 war shots were fired. So that's the problem with low budget navies. You have the hardware, but you are not going to use in exercise, because if the war starts, you don't have the hardware. And but the torpedo has a design failure. So that's because the manufacturer of the torpedo after the war say, well, send me the torpedo and I'm going to fix it, this one for free, and I'm going to please use that in exercises to show my torpedoes are good. But in fact, the Germans lost the sales of that torpedoes to the Brazilians, because the Brazilians says, well, the torpedoes didn't work for the Argentinians, so they are not going to work for me. But the torpedoes, the Brazilians bought the tigerfish. Well, so they ended with the same problem, but from another manufacturer. So, well, it's the same.
One thing I was going to show real quick. Hold on. Excuse the screens within the screens for a moment. But I had gone through a pretty good amount.
I like your.
Yes. What I didn't know about that, I don't know if that's. I didn't know if that was an actual picture or put together, but I like that picture. What I found was and again, this follows very in line with what you stated in the book, but every time I've put Splendid or a similar class sub against the San Luis, it is very difficult to detect. And what was very interesting in reading in the books is, and I think it might have been in the Go Find Him, was that they knew going in it was going to be difficult. So another thing I saw in some of the simulations I did was not more often than not, San Luis would fire before it would get a good passive detection before Splendid could fire. But what I always found was that, or what I was finding, and again, repeated simulations of this, is that Splendid's torpedoes would be quicker, right? And they had what appeared to be an in-string or more effective pattern or guidance pattern, being Y or G. But what I found interesting later in researching it a bit, and again, here's the situation. The mod one, I think that Command has Splendid with mod 1, but that's incorrect. I think they have mod 0s. But so I cheated a little bit here. But as you can see, the Tigerfish, the sonar, the inherent sonar in the torpedo itself has a much larger range than the I'm sorry, I should know that.
Mark 37.
Yeah, correct. Here's the picture of that too. And again, it's noted as having had a maximum range of 0.35 nautical miles. And then in comparison, if you look at the Tigerfish, that has a nautical mile range. So it was extremely interesting to try and go through these simulations. Let me stop sharing. It was all the forces involved, all the platforms involved were modern. They in their own right, and I think that was the eye-opening aspect of reading both books. Is just, I mean, how well trained the Argentine forces were, as well as they had good equipment, had very good equipment, especially having a diesel littoral water capable submarine. The Type 209s were modern, for lack of a better term, and they used it effectively. And I think, again, in reading that page 40 around there, extremely effective. I didn't know how close they had gotten. And again, I found it interesting that Woodward had mentioned the possibility of basically saying, don't go help the Sheffield because of that danger too. So, I mean, a part of ASW is, of course, making other people not able to do what they need to do or want to do. So I think that both sides in their own right were very, very efficient, and were both effective at defending their high value units, right? So I think you got that across very well in both books, and I think you've done both sides of service in that regards. Let me just open the floor to some questions from the audience. Please, anybody listening, if you have any questions specific to either book or what we've talked about, please ask now. If nobody does, then I got other things. So kind of in retrospect, where would you take the research now? I know you mentioned that one situation of finding out what submarine that was attacked. Are there any other aspects of this topic from either side's perspective that you feel is still an untold story? Like, do you have any, if you had to do a part 3, what would it be?
Part 3, that's a very interesting question also. I really like to keep investigating about the role of the Russians down south. I think this is the hidden part of the war, about the Soviet submarines in the area. I know for positive, the Soviets has one diesel submarine, a Foxtrot class submarine, near Africa, not far from the area of operations. But I have a certain informal information about a couple, one or two nuclear submarines there. That maybe that justifies the fact that my friends in the Argentinian Navy, my friend, but because I know the people, on my 5 May 1982, they attacked a nuclear boat. They are positive about that. And for example, Admiral Parry, 2 days later, attacked a positive submarine for him in a prop sub for the records. But he's positive that was a submarine. Of course, he's positive, but that's not in the records. But that fog of war of a submarine is there, but I couldn't write that because I'm not so sure after. Well, I know I really like that part of the war. I really like the Soviet interference in submarines. I really like to investigate about the Soviet help to Argentina in satellite information. We have snippets of information, but I really like to investigate further about it. So the Soviet part of the war is still very interesting for me, and well, I don't know. The war, the submarine war is always fascinating. So I'm going to keep investigating about that overall. But the Soviets is my current obsession.
I've grown interested in what level the United States was doing as well. The U.S. at that time period, without the U.S. was very interesting. I'll use that term in its policies with Latin America throughout the late 70s and early 80s, and it was a weird situation, and it's interesting how it was interesting just in retrospect how kind of like clandestine it was in regards to how much help we were giving or not. It was a weird juggling act from the United States' perspective too. So I have a similar interest in the U.S., but also just from that perspective, immediately after the conflict, of course, the U.S. Navy did some lessons of Falklands documentation too. So it was really interesting to see how the U.S. and the Soviet Union were almost using this as a sandbox, like a very, very
Yes.
weird and odd sandbox, right? And I'm very interested, very similar. Like, how close were they getting? Were they getting within the area of operations in order to determine that they could not be detected? And I'm very curious as how much the U.S. did. Of course, we might never know. But let me post a couple questions here real quick. Okay, I think we went over this, but would it be possible to elaborate on the problems SSNs face in shallow waters? I think I kind of asked this before, but has any of it gotten better over time that you're aware of?
I don't know. The nuclear submarines has an inherent problem because the size of that you say that one of the advantages the speed, the high speed. In shallow waters, you can go at high speed because it's not safe to have a big boat with, for example, 20 meters of water under the keel. It's not safe to operate there. Of course, the HMS Conqueror operates in the near the Argentinian mainland, and I think 70 or 60 or 70 meters of water, but was a very low speed, and they have plenty of time, and the anti-submarine capacity of the Argentine Navy there was nil.
So
So contested.
My
Yes.
question in return then would be, what makes it that much easier for the Type 209, for example? What would make it easier at all for a diesel submarine in littoral waters? Like, so what makes it that much safer for a diesel sub to operate in those same shallow waters? Is there any physical difference in that regard? Is there any?
Yes, diesel submarine is much is not as bigger as the nuclear submarine, and the speed is not a problem. Is a sprint for a diesel submarine is a no go in batteries, because you are going to expend the batteries in a couple of hours. The edge of the nuclear submarine is the speed, and the advantage to go to another position in a couple of hours. And diesel electric boat is going to wait there for the targets. A nuclear submarine could
Right.
pray the targets, follow the targets, and pray for it. You know the submerged lines of approach, the problem you have in a submerged lines of approach in a diesel boat. Well, you have a problem there. You have to be really be careful where you start the chase, and because your own velocity and the velocity of the target. In a nuclear submarine, that's not a problem, because usually your speed is much better than the speed of the target. So, well, that you have problem of speed and you know the size of the submarine. Size does matter.
I wasn't gonna go there, but there you go. And here's a quick message from Spain. So, hello from Spain.
Okay. Hola, hola, ¿qué tal?
All right. Let's see. Here's another question. Were both Tigerfish and SST-4 also affected by shallow waters the same ways as the sonars designed for deep waters?
Yes, well, Tigerfish, yes, they have a problem with the small sonar in the head of the torpedo, and the inactive mode. It has a bones with in shallow waters with the bottom and with the surface of the water. SST4 has a very similar problem, but not as worse than in the Tigerfish. So yes, the answer is yes. A torpedo is more comfortable in deep waters than in shallow waters, but Tigerfish has a real problem there.
So I have some what if questions of my own here then. Let's see. Hold on a second. Let me get my contours out of here just for a little bit. So obviously there are certain situations, and these are described very well in both books. Please go buy them. There are situations where the SSNs did travel up into these bay areas, correct? These gulfs. And
Yes.
I think at one point or another, you did mention that one of the advantages potentially to taking the risk of that was the fact that you have this very large basin here to run away at, right? So I'm assuming that the British submarines took some more risks over time to try to get
Yes. Of course.
to try to capture, just like you were kind of saying just recently. I don't. It's almost as if it was almost as if in reading both books that over time they were willing to take more of a risk. Did you get that impression as well?
Yes, that's correct. But have in mind that the risk, I think, the risks are there. The submarines enter the risky areas when the anti-submarine assets deployed there was not very efficient or big. So have in mind, for example, when submarine Splendid detected a tracker rocket near the area of the operations, well, the commander
Oh, hello, you still there? I think we lost Mariano for a moment there. Let's see if he reconnects. Well, we made it 56 minutes, everybody.
Okay,
Hello?
okay.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, I was very happy you're back. Go for it again. If you want to restate that, go ahead.
No, so that the submarines take the risks when the anti-submarine assets deployed there were nil or not efficient. For example, when the submarine Splendid have a detection of a tracker radar on May 4, well, in shallow water say, well, we are not going to push my luck. I'm going to move to other area and try it later. So in shallow waters, submarine lost a lot of I don't know the freedom of movement. So I think is the best way to escape an aerial weapon is to go deep. You can go deep in shallow waters.
Right.
So a submarine commander is not stupid and know that.
So here's a really good question because it's close to my heart as well. Do you think that the Argentine Navy would have done better by grouping up and trying to force a Mahan style decisive battle with the UK fleet? And we're getting into it. I could probably
Now,
talk about this for hours, by the way, but there you go. 1 minute. What would you do?
no. I think that the Corvette fleet of Bing was the right answer for that problem. Argentina has not the edge there. The British has the codes of the Argentinian Navy. The British have the much better command and control. The British has a more efficient fleet, and maybe you don't know that, but a lot of Exocets missiles in early May of the Argentinian Fleet Navy are not calibrated.
Mm.
So even if the Argentinian Navy has a good land position and launch the Exocets, the Exocet radars maybe are not going to detect nothing. So that was corrected in May, but in early May, a lot of missiles have that kind of defects. So I don't know. Maybe it's my opinion that if the Argentinians start a Jutland battle, well, they're going to end in the bottom.
I like that description. What okay, that obviously was one factor, but did intelligence play a factor in not in the defensive posturing post the attack on Belgrano? So post May 2nd, what were some of the main reasons why the Navy, the Argentine Navy, felt like it had to reincorporate its task group closer to the coast? Was there any inkling of a second offensive or a third offensive attempt from any other direction, or had, in other words, in all the books we've read about this conflict, it seemed very cut and dry that the Argentine Navy moved back towards port. And I think you very well described in the books that they were extremely successful at protecting the asset, protecting the high value asset. But was there any, hopefully this is not too contentious a topic, was there any contention exhibited within the Argentine Navy as to those post May 2nd change of posture?
Well, after May 2nd, the Argentine Navy has the idea that's two ideas. First of all, the satellite surveillance was much better than that really was. Maybe mostly in real time. That was the idea, that in daytime the information came to the British in real time, and with a delay of a couple of hours at night hours. But that's not true, but was the idea of the Argentinian Navy High Command. And the second idea is that you are not able to detect or stop a nuclear submarine. That's the problems the Argentinian Navy faced in their minds, but because that's not true. But so with that problems in the minds, after the days, the Argentinian Navy say, well, we need a plan to use the surface fleet. But a lot of plans were presented. For example, one plan was to detach the two Type 42s destroyers, the newer ones in the fleet, to a high dash to intercept the Queen Elizabeth transatlantic in the middle of the ocean, destroy it, go back. But that one of the plan presented was in right, so was a good plan. It's not an idea or a coffee. But at the end, all over the plans ended with we are going to be at the bottom of the sea in the middle of that operation because the British have satellite surveillance and nuclear submarines. So no plan came that could override that problems. So the Argentinian surface fleet remains in territorial waters in 12-mile limits all over the war until the war ended. That have a price. That has a price even right now, because the people who was in the islands, the army people, say, well, the Navy never went to the island to help us. And the people of the Air Force, this is still an argument today. And the people of the Air Force say, well, we sent our planes to attack the fleet, and we know that a lot of pilots is never to came back, and you never reach the fleet. So there are still nearly 40 years after the war a discussion about the role of the Argentinian Navy surface fleet and why another idea came to after May 2. I don't know if that answered the question.
Well, part of that, strategic repositioning was also to draw the British into some of those shallower waters near where potentially additional resources from the Air Force could even have helped, right? So I mean, there's any number of factors in the situation. What was I going to say? I had one question. I'll post. Do you have enough time to continue a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another question. Did the ARA ever test the secondary anti-surface capability of Sea Dart that you're aware of?
As far as I know, that was never tested. Never.
Very good. Let me see if I can. I'm going to try to go through these as fast as we can. Weren't also the acoustic conditions for passive sonar detection normally poor in the area? Bad weather on surface. I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Of course. Mostly in shallow waters, the acoustic conditions for passive sonar is not good. In the Argentinian continental shelf is much worse because a lot of rivers or change of salinity are in the area. A lot of krill banks, a lot of shoal of fish. So a lot of fishing fleets, even the Soviet fishing fleet in the area, a large Soviet fishing fleet in the area. So yes, passive sonar conditions is really no good, except for north of the islands, like 100 miles north of the islands, that propagation conditions are fairly good. And in fact, during a couple of days, in like for 4 May to 8 or 10 May in 1982, sonar conditions were exceptionally good. But I don't know why the conditions were good those days and not another ones. But I don't know. Maybe because of the weather, or because of the fish were not there. Because I don't know. But both submarine captains, I mentioned the Acueta from the San Luis and Roger Lynott in Splendid, informs in the war diaries that sonar conditions are good at those days. But overall, in the campaign, sonar conditions were good for active sonar or passive sonar.
We'll try to get through a couple of these questions as quickly as we can. The episode of Conqueror being unable to establish quickly a steady contact with Santa Fe, running full speed towards Georgia, was rather expressive or explicative to me. Any comments on that?
Our Conqueror have a problem there because Conqueror was filled with incorrect information, or I don't know if incorrect or partial information. So Conqueror looked for Santa Fe in a wrong area. So Santa Fe was not very close to Conqueror, but have in mind that even that Santa Fe tried to mask the noises in the coastal waters of South Georgia, Georgia del Sur. So, the explanation is Conqueror was never very close to Santa Fe, and Santa Fe, the commander of Santa Fe, have a good idea to mask the noise of his own boat.
I'm going to show this one, but I'm going to reword this one because I have a similar question. Mine is more distinct to the close calls that were actually written about in the book. So, out of everything you've researched, what do you feel was the closest call? Right? What do you feel? What was the most intriguing close call or what if situation? Like what situation do you think was as close to potentially having a different result than it actually did? I'll let you.
Well,
there were a lot of examples. So
yes. Well, I think that Argentina, the COFOR Argentinian Submarine Command Forces, could maybe, if the command of the submarine forces deployed the 3 submarines, even with the noise problem, even when Santa Fe was an old boat, unable to dive more than at periscope depth, maybe if he's more aggressive with the submarines, maybe he's going to lose 1 submarine or 2, but attacking the task group in the center of the task group, or threatening to attack, maybe that is the closest call. But I think that's the change. If I back in 1982, I will use my submarines more aggressively, and I say, well, I have of course with the insight that the submarine, the nuclear submarines are not are not a dead ray in any navy. So, but have limitations or something like that. I will use the submarines more aggressively. And the war was the closest call. I think the war as is loose when the starts. Why? Because the Argentinian Navy has no match is no match for the Royal Navy. So an island isolated, as the Pacific War shows, is an island lost. So Argentina has a strategic problem, not a tactical or operational one. So with that strategic problem unsolved, you could not won the war. So that's my, I don't know if that answered the question, but
I mean, yeah, in retrospect, though, having that, and it sounded like it was a relatively aggressive posture. May 1st, up through that, the entire Banzai night, up through May 2nd. I think it was a pretty aggressive stance. It was the least amount of British naval resources on hand at that moment. It got, more resources were coming, and I don't know how much information Argentina had at the time that more British sources probably were going to come. I think it's a pretty easy question to answer for yourself, that hey, if we don't attack now, more are going to show up, right? So again, I think a lot what came across in both books was that a lot of environmental issues, a lot of technological issues for both sides, and nothing was a sure thing, right? And I think the environment in particular was harsher than the Royal Navy had dealt with for decades, right? Any other questions from the audience before we wrap up? Is there any way you would have approached the entire project differently in retrospect? Like, was there anything that you would have done differently? I guess I'll end with that, just as a zinger. Was there any aspect of it? Would you have approached certain research differently, or would you have done anything differently in retrospect in how you approached the topic?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. I'm quite happy with the end, and because I start very slowly, and because it's as a hobby, and the things developed with time. So I don't know. I'm quite happy with the outcome, and I'm pretty happy that some people who was not valored, because I don't know, the anti-submarine operators from both sides are like hidden in the history, because well, they don't kill any enemy submarine, well, but they did a huge part in the war. I'm really happy that people has the recognition that really deserves, not because of the books, because of the time got then that recognition. And I don't know, that's a hobby for me. So yes, I'm happy with the outcome. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah,
So,
we all appreciate you talking to us. There was one last question. Let's see if we can work it in. I don't know how quick a question it is. Any insight about the reasons behind the dramatic fall in operative capability of Salta between 81 and 82? Any quick response?
oh well, that's a very interesting question. Well, Salta in 1981 was in the top of the top operatively was the top unit, but Salta entered dry dock in late 1981 or early 1982, and was out the dry dock with problems in the noise, no, what with noise problems. That the problem was resolved after a certain time, but the Argentinian Navy was unable to solve that problems really. So why? I don't think the Salta problem is a material problem, but they have a problem with the captain. So that's not a secret. The captain was relieved of duty in the middle of the war, so it's not was not a happy unit. The happy ship, you know that the happy ship term, Salta was not a happy happy ship. So they have a certain material problems and certain leadership problems, and I don't know, the Salta was of the war because of it. And I don't know if you answer the question, but yes, with Captain, the former captain of the captain of 1981 was a top unit, and 1 year later with another captain was not a happy ship. Maybe that's the question. That's the answer. I don't
Okay.
want to be rude to the captains. I
Oh,
know
I know.
people
Yeah.
problems, but in
Yeah.
fact, the captain of
It just
1981 was a top
it,
lucky.
it compounds other issues, right? Always. Yeah. But thank you very much, Mariano, and
No, thank you.
greatly appreciate it. And I have probably 100 other questions, but maybe I'll just bug you on the side with just very specific ones. But I'd love to do this again at some point, even just at some point, just for just to get in touch again about maybe what your hobby has brought you into at the when I talk to you again, maybe. But thank you very much, and thank you very much to everybody that's participated as well.
No, thank you to you, Peter, and sorry for my English. I'm not a native
It was
English
very,
speaker,
it was
so
very
sorry for that. But thank you. I really enjoyed that time. I'm really enjoyed this kind of things. So
we
really,
appreciate both the books and your openness to talk about them, and thank you to everybody that contributed as well. I know there were probably other people that contributed directly with both books. Hopefully, I'll name them in the comments. But I appreciate it, and thank you very much. Have a good day.
thank you. Okay.